Uh, Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today for this Masters of Conversion series webinar. My name is Vipul, and I am the marketing manager at VWO, a full funnel experience optimization platform. Uh, Excuse me for a dim lighting in my room right now. It's rainy season here in India, and it's really humid, and everybody has their air conditioning on, so you know what happens to the power supply. So I'm really sorry for that. Alongside me, as you can see, is Caroline Hynes, who is the director of product management at Zendesk, a company that I'm sure that we all admire for their product and for their service. Uh, Thank you so much for joining in, Caroline, and giving us your time.
You are more than welcome from a now dry Dublin. Was rainy, not quite as humid as India, but definitely rainy.
Oh, don't ask. It's really humid in India. Of course, people who know, they know. It's it's a lot, I would say. That's all I can say. So yeah, thank you so much, for choosing to share your learnings, your experience of I think 22 plus years in product management,
That makes me
and
feel very young.
and experienced, I would say. Right, and that's why I'm personally really excited to be talking to you today, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear about your journey and about your learnings from the product management experience and business experience in general. Right, so great. So I'll begin. I have prepared a few questions for you, and I'll begin with the first one. Let me pull up the questions first. Right, so excuse me for that noise as well. Dinner is being prepared. So you have worked across industries like media and banking and now software for quite a while, right? And what do you think are those commonalities when it comes to the product management across different industries? And also, if you can, list maybe some of the differences as well, that would be great.
Yeah, so I guess when I was working, especially in my early career, and in some of those industries, product management was very nascent, and what we were doing wasn't necessarily called product management. It was a different names given to the same role. But when we think about what was consistent, and regardless of the industry that we're in, I guess it's really about understanding your customer and understanding who you're serving today, but also who you want to serve tomorrow or in the next couple of months or in the next year, whatever you're thinking about. But not just, I guess, understanding them, but like spending time with your customers, spending time listening to your customers, which is probably a theme that will be echoed throughout this conversation. And then look at kind of like the market drivers as well. So how is the sector that you're in changing? How can you help predict that change? How can you test some ideas around that as well? I think the other part of it as well is around the collaboration side of things. So product management is definitely a role that sits in the middle and it's like an octopus, has to work across an organization. And that's true regardless of the type of product that you're building. So like getting comfortable dealing with areas of the business that you mightn't deal with ordinarily is very important. I guess some of the differences really focuses around some of the speed. So like in banking, it can be a little bit slower to deliver product because of the compliance and regulation around it, right? Whereas when you're delivering SaaS software, for that's B2B or B2C, it tends to be the compliance element of it is different. We obviously have security and compliance, but it's not as regulated, I suppose, in some of the areas. And I think just, there's also, especially in my experience working there, there's also a tendency to be potentially a little bit more conservative in some of those industries as well as to move things forward. So it can take a lot more time to do research or test things out rather than kind of the release and learn model that we can adopt in the kind of more software industry, pure software industry. And those a lot of those, like when I worked in banking or when I worked in other industries, there was a retail or a physical space associated with it as well. So you're not just impacting an online space, you have to factor in that retail or physical environment also.
Right. So were you also managing the experience in the product part of the physical space as well?
No, but there was a coordination with it, or if there was going to be impact,
Right.
if we were doing something online that was going to potentially impact or cause customer queries or anything like that in the physical space, we had to know that for one sector. When I worked in the bank, it was a joint venture with our post office service, so I did do work there around the transition of our product being used by the postmasters as well as by the customers. Yeah.
Right. Great. That's greatly summed up, I would say, and I can imagine the amount of effort that it takes to really work across the industry. And of course, for me as a fresher, although I just have 4+ years of experience, but still, if I have to look at how different industries work, they appear really really complex, and the dynamics of how people uh, interact with the products in these spaces. At least to me, it sounds really really cumbersome, and definitely requires a lot of teamwork. So speaking of team, of course, that should have been my first question though. But if you can just maybe elaborate about your team at Zendesk, and if you can just share more about your career at Zendesk so far.
Oh yeah, sure. I've been with Zendesk for just over a year, and I am director of product for our analytics offering. And my team before COVID was highly distributed, so we had team members in San Francisco, in Montpellier, in the south of France, in Dublin, and in London. That's just the product team, and our engineering team were split between France and Dublin as well. We're obviously working in a more distributed, more permanently distributed environment, at least for the next 12 months or so. But I guess our product management team have a wealth of varying experience. Some have worked in analytics, some have worked in different industries, but and some have come through the ranks within Zendesk as well from different areas. But I guess within Zendesk we're lucky that we have a large product community that we can all learn from and lean into and work with, but we also have the autonomy within our own product group to work as we need to work in order to build our roadmaps, collaborate with our engineering and marketing partners, and ultimately ship product and work with our customers to get that feedback. So I think this has been a change for us in that the distribution was always there, but the fact that we don't ever come together now to do kind of planning or strategy work where we would have come together and trying to find a way to make that feel more human while not being together is kind of the challenge that we've been focused on as well.
Right, and with the pandemic setting in, of course, the distance has only increased. So yeah, that's true. Let's not dive into the boring parts.
Yeah.
So quickly moving on to the next question. So I saw somewhere on the internet that that you care about the cause for women in STEM, right? And so yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts around this topic, and what trends do you see in terms of women's participation in the product management roles, or let's say even the conversion optimization roles.
Yeah, so yes, I feel passionately about women's STEM. I do. Anyway, I was doing a lot of talking in our high schools and secondary schools, encouraging girls to think about STEM and not just think about it as a computer science option, and kind of advocating the fact that STEM is broader than that, and that we have product management roles, we have marketing roles. They all kind of feed into this environment that was working in the STEM organization.
Right.
I still believe that our funnel is still pretty narrow. We're still getting few women through those tracks, even on the computer science track, to kind of get in the roles. And if we don't have women interested in college or when they're doing their work experience in these roles, it's going to be harder to get them there. When we were interviewing for a role about 6 to 8 months ago for my team, we didn't have one female candidate come externally. So, I think there's still a big challenge there. I think there's perceived barriers rather than barriers, and it's up to the men and women working in technology and working in STEM to advocate for those coming up. I think it's also perfectly okay if you don't want to work in a STEM organization, but if you do, that you know that there's people there who will help. And I think being available to young women and women in college, or women who are working and who are interested in maybe changing roles, and being available to answer questions or support and kind of get out there and demystify it a little bit is incredibly important.
Right. So you mentioned about the word you mentioned the word challenge, of course, and specifically mentioned perceived challenges. So, what is that challenge, and what are those perceived challenges which which resolving which I think can smoothen the path for a lot of women out there.
Yeah, so I think some of the challenges that I hear when talking
Hmm.
to like women coming through the ranks is like, do you have to be super technical to work in these type of roles? And they've been a little bit intimidated if they're not programmers or and they have a different skill set to bring to it.
Hmm.
Is it going to be a full male or a male environment that they go into, and what does that actually look like? I think it's those when I say perceived challenges, that's what I mean. It's like kind of breaking down the fact that there's lots of different roles. There's room for everybody. Yes, there's more men potentially in the engineering orgs and some of the orgs, but there's also you've got the bias towards women in other parts of the department, like marketing and things like that. That still ring true sometimes. So it potentially all balances out. But I think there is a fear around that, especially in recent years with everything that's been in the media and press around it. But I think
Hmm.
accepting that you don't have to be a computer scientist to work in this area. And the fact that it is a very collaborative environment and you get to kind of lean in and learn all of the time is really exciting once people start to understand that.
So, uh, the third question here would be that I was looking at your LinkedIn, and you've worked with many globally admired brands, Disney, Intercom, and many others, of course, and now Zendesk, right? So, if you could maybe sum up the learnings from these companies, working at these companies within, if so as to like just share 3 to 4 months, Russ. Like, what are those things which you were able to figure out working at these big brands?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. The first thing, and they're not in any order,
Mhm.
is that you don't have to know it all, and asking for help
Right.
is a sign of strength. And I think that's a really important throughout your career. And I'm always trying to hire people who have different experiences and are smarter than me in other ways, so that I can and learn from them and support them in other ways. But definitely, no
Hmm.
one knows everything. Even if somebody comes across confidently, they're probably doubting themselves in some way too. So support each other and ask for help. I think it's important to love your customers. That doesn't mean again, and by that I mean like get to understand their needs, their use cases, help them frame the problems. Oftentimes we have customers, generally not just Zendesk, come and tell us they want a feature without really understanding what they're trying to achieve. So like kind of
Hmm.
spend some time just not saying yes to customers, but understanding actually what their goal is, and is there a way already within your product that you can achieve that, or is there a smaller enhancement rather than a completely new feature that you need to build? So I think that's really important. And I think that role of collaboration and partnership is super important. So, you know, collaboration across your organization, especially in like the environment I'm in, we work very closely with our billing partners, our legal partners, our marketing partners. And obviously there's the standard, everyone expects engineering and design to be in partnership with product as well, but you can't underplay the importance of that collaboration and making it a meaningful collaboration. So it's not just reaching out when the product team needs something. It's also about like getting their ideas and getting them involved in the process, that it's not an end of funnel type of thing. And then I think general listen to learn. Like we all have our own experiences. And I think we're all so busy and we're all in meetings and we're trying to move on to the next thing. And sometimes we just forget to listen. And it's amazing what you can hear and pick up by just
Hmm.
listening to what other people are saying as well. So and it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, that's the other thing. Like,
Right.
there's nobody who hasn't made a mistake, big or small. But the best thing you can do is like learn from it, understand it. Don't spend too long beating yourself up. I think it's too easy to say don't beat yourself up. People who care will probably beat themselves up for a period of time, but learn from it and don't make that same mistake again, or don't make it in the same way.
Right. And it's a commonly followed notion is that feel free to make mistakes, right? But I personally feel that it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay to repeat them. right? And
Yeah, exactly.
so you should not in any case make failure your habit. Of course, strive to be better than the previous one. And I think that's a great learning. I think most people lose their confidence as soon as they make their first mistake.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
right, and that's something which people really need to take care of and understand. Not just learn that what wrong did they do, but also understand the situation they were in when they actually
Right.
made that mistake and what was
Yeah.
the surroundings. So that all makes up for in terms of resolving that issue and bringing you an inch
I think,
closer
and
towards the
owning it as
success.
well, right? And just is very important. But
Hmm.
we've all done it.
Right. So branching from this, since you are now at this such a senior role, right, and you are of course recruiting a lot of product managers, right? So since you mentioned all these points, right, and these are great points, so do you, when you are interviewing candidates for the product management jobs, right? Uh, so what are you looking for in them? What do you ask?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things I look for, and I don't ask directly because you can tell through answers and behaviors. Is curiosity. Someone who's curious about the work that they're doing, but the world around them and people. I think that's really key. And you can tell by how someone reflects on a question that you give, and how they ask you questions during the process as well. So there's definitely that. The ability to empathize, I think, is really important. So empathize, we talk a lot about empathizing with our customers, right? So, but how do you empathize with other product people? How are you empathizing with your engineering peers, and other people within the organization that you have to work with in order to be successful and have your product successful as well? I think that's really important. And then
Hmm.
also, you know, I think it's always interesting to ask people what their favorite B2C product is, and for them to explain why they like it and what they find useful in it and what they don't like about it and what they would change. I think we use apps all of the time within our professional life, and we kind of scrutinize them, quite critique them, but we use a lot in our personal lives, and I don't know if we think about them in the same way. So it's always interesting to hear how people think about that as well. But I think that curiosity, that empathy, that wanting to work with other people, and going back to what I was saying, like nobody knows it all, and for someone to be able to put their hands up and say, well, actually, I don't know that, or I'd have to think about that. I think that's a real sign of strength, because you're going to get someone who's not going to try and BS you, and if they're not going to BS you, they're not going to BS your customers.
Right. And I was actually looking at the questions that are coming in. Uh, I'm really sorry. It's Ebenezer, or it might be pronounced differently. I'm sorry, Ebenezer, if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, but they thank me for asking this question. I think it's a really pressing question for a lot of people. Uh, so yeah, I think I hope that was able to answer your question, Ebenezer. Uh, and of course, guys, you can send in your questions using the questions panel. And although we have allocated 15 minutes towards the end to take your questions, uh, we'll allow you to switch on your mics and ask your questions directly to Caroline. Just let us know that you would want to come on mic and ask your questions directly, and we'll be happy to do that. Right. So I'll wait for
Absolutely.
more questions. Right. So I'll wait for more questions to come in, and meanwhile we'll move on to the next questions that I have for you, Caroline. So I'll switch gears a bit and start discussing a little bit more about the product Zendesk itself. Right. So particularly at Zendesk, it's a great product. Right. Everybody knows it, of course. So how do you prioritize product or feature developments there?
Yeah. So we have our company goals that we're trying to achieve, and we look at so I'll speak for my team. We look at how our work that we're doing, what our own goals are within our team, and we have 4 key goals that we've been tracking all year, and then we map them to the company goals. So we try and bubble everything back up so that we're shipping what's actually going to not just benefit Explore, but overall Zendesk customers. And then we're looking at a couple of things, right? So our product is relatively new and in its infancy, so we are looking at like just pure product gaps and what do we need to do to kind of bring the product up. So there's that. We also look at customer needs and market trends as well, and we prioritize based on those criteria. And we do we try and do kind of regular planning, like we do monthly planning where we're touching base and making sure the work that we're doing is like planned for the future is still on track and still necessary. Like I think that's the big question that we need to be asking is the work that we're doing still the right work to be doing, or the work that we plan still the right work to be planned? And if not, let's stop, or let's prioritize, or let's do it later if there's something more important that needs to be done. And I think they're the questions that are really important, and also understanding the trade-offs, right? So if we're doing, what's your anti-roadmap? So like we're doing this amount of work for H1, these are the things we're not going to do, and are they the right trade-offs to make? And then there's also like the balance with, we look at one roadmap, we look at our engineering roadmap alongside our product roadmap, and we prioritize that as one, and so we don't have a separate roadmap for that. So we do quarterly kind of official planning. We do like 9-month roadmaps, and then but we look as a team kind of all of the time to assess that we're doing the work we're doing is still the right work to be doing, taking into account market or customer or competitor trends.
Sure. Thanks. I was actually getting distracted by the number of questions that are coming in actually. I hope I can pick some right now. Maybe I'll reserve them for the end. But since you mentioned about incorporating the whether to know whether you're building the right product feature or not, and it's really important to ask directly to the customers, right? And of course, you're not really going to build what customers exactly have told you. You have to look at there's this concept of jobs to be done, right? And of course, you must be familiar with that. So it's really important to understand what jobs the customers trying to do, what's the emotional behavior they're trying to exhibit, right? So how do you incorporate that, the VOC, the voice of customer, in the product development process? What are those key sources for VOC?
Yeah, so we have a product development team a VOC team who work with our product development org, and that is very much around our go-to-market teams and what our customers are saying, and again, it tends to be we want this feature, and kind of teasing our VOC team help tease out actually what's the problem that they're trying to solve for, what's the job to be done, and looking at trends across that feedback as well. And then bubbling them up to kind of the product level and the goals that we're trying to achieve. So that's kind of like the official VOC path. And our VOC team work very closely with the product and engineering org to share that information and to validate it with us, and so that we can engage with the customers as well. And we also have a design and research team that work within the product org. And, that's a lot of customer interviews and interactions to either work through features that we're building or thinking about building, or just to get general customer feedback and sentiment on the product as well. And that feeds into that VOC. And then we have customer conversations continually within the product org, where we're talking to customers, just how they're using the product, not necessarily in terms of formal feedback, but just how they're using it, where their pain points are. And then that's another input, obviously, into the VOC. So we take that collectively and cohesively, and we feed that into the roadmap that way. So we're not, it's an input as opposed to the driver, I suppose, is an important thing to consider.
Right, and I can actually take this question because it's a really good one and related to what you just shared. So Magdalena, she is asking, at which stage of the product development process do you actually involve a customer?
Oh, all the way. So I guess where we are, so we're continually talking to customers. So if we have an initiative whereby, say in a quarter's time or 2 quarters time, we were building a new, bigger feature, we would start our conversations there if we're building it from the ground up, so that we can get input. I guess the big thing to understand is that we always have a hypothesis that we're testing. We're not like reaching out to the customers to we're validating our hypothesis or disproving it, I suppose.
Right.
So we would do that maybe a quarter or 2 quarters out, depending on the size of the initiative. And then we would always, or at least aim to, loop back in with those customers as we go through the process. So as we prototype or do lo-fi or hi-fi designs, and kind of bring in kind of a mix of customers of size and industry into the process, so that they can see how we're progressing. And again, it's to validate and to support, but not necessarily. We're not looking for the green light. That's not the one check that we get whether we do the right thing, but it is an ongoing conversation. And I think it's important. The other thing that we do within my team for sure is we share a calendar of the conversations that we're having with customers. And I think that's really important, so that it's not just product managers or design and researchers, but our engineering partners can join those calls if their calendars allow as well. So, really involving everybody who's involved in touching the product and building the product, understanding what our customers are saying and how they're using it. Because, you know yourself, how you build it and how you hope it's used is not always the case.
Exactly. Right. So that actually, triggered two questions in my head. So the first question would be, like, are there any specific metrics? Are those any specific trigger points that you track within the products that gives you an understanding of how engaged are the users with the product, and how do you squeeze out insights from that data, that whether this feature should continue to be in the system or should it be taken out of the system?
Yeah. So each feature that we would build would have its own measure of success. So that's one of the things. So like we think about, what's the problem that's going to be solved? How do we know when it's solved? And how are we going to measure the success of that? And how long is it going to take, I guess, to understand whether we should start seeing those triggers, right? So whether it's adoption. So one of the things might be you can share reports outside of with people who don't have a license to Zendesk. So how many people are doing that? Or you're new to Zendesk, new to Explore. How long does it take for you to create your first dashboard? Things like that. There's measures like that we would use. And we work with product, but we also consult our marketing and engineering peers on that as well. And we would have potentially have engineering KPIs as well, and not just product KPIs. So yeah, we do that for the bigger features that we're trying to do. I think because it is a relatively new product, we haven't gotten into the sunsetting phase yet, but it's incredibly important, right? So there's a couple of things that are important. One is that you build a feature through so that it's useful and not hacky, right? And you don't just keep building partially onto a product. Exactly. And creating a lot of technical debt just to ship a lot of things. So you kind of need to slow down to speed up sometimes. And then the other side of it is, now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Sunsetting, yeah. So like, just because a feature is there and you love it, if it's not being used, or if it's no longer adding the right value, or if it's no longer in the right place, or whatever it may be, saying goodbye to your baby can be hard for product managers, but the data has to speak. So we do that.
Right. I can totally understand. It's a hard call because you've invested a lot of time and effort, and I know the conversations that happen between a product manager and the engineering managers, right? Because they're giving away the engineering resources, and you have to be really careful as to which feature actually should go in the next, in the next quarter or so. So yeah, I think that's a hard thing to say goodbye to the feature that you've built, right? So second question that I had was that once you've collected all this information, right, and it's really, really valuable information and could be used by just every department in the organization. So what do you do, particularly at Zendesk, if you can share, to share this, learning with the team internally?
Yeah, so we do our readouts for our roadmaps, our quarterly roadmaps and alignment roadmaps frequently as an organization, product and engineering and marketing. And oftentimes we will share then the impact of work that we have done from a previous quarter or a quarter out of that. So there's that shared learning. We also have monthly syncs where we walk through demos of work that we're doing and the impact of features that we've built. And those are all at a product level, an individual product level, and they're recorded and shared because it's just not, it's a big org, right? It's not possible to have everybody on the call all of the time. And then we also do a monthly session in EMEA anyway, to share with our support and advocacy and sales teams work that's upcoming, how we're going to measure it, the kind of customers that we're expecting to use it, and then the impact of any work that we've done. So we try and do as much regionally as possible, record and share, and then we try and use the quarterly planning sessions as well to share impact. We like every other organization, we use Slack as well to share this information, and Confluence and all of that. I mean, it's such a large surface area of a product and various products that we have. It'll be a challenge to stay on top of every single KPI, but I think the big thing is our product operations team looking at horizontally across those things that we can apply learnings, and often that is more around process, right? So like, did a team do something different when they were measuring, or did a team do something different when speaking to multiple customers to get the data or whatever? So like, we can learn from the process side of things as well as the data side.
Definitely. And I actually asked this question because we do this exercise at VWO. Anytime our product managers actually go on calls with a customer, and so they create a document with all the questions and their answers, and they share it internally in the team. And that's, as a marketer, I would say it's a really, really great resource for me to understand what the pain points of the customers are when they come to us looking for a solution. That really helps us in building a very, very refined messaging strategy, and a lot of value in this exercise, I would say.
Yeah, we do similarly when we're doing kind of customer specific calls on Explore. We've initiated them or either around usability or research or general feedback, and share them too. And I think that's important for the marketing team and also for the engineering team who can't always join to hear that information for sure.
Right. So since we are also talking about the product, I just also wanted to get an understanding, maybe not you particularly, but maybe if you can give me an idea about how experimentation is viewed at Zendesk, right? Is it always necessary, and what are those situations in which a feature needs to be pushed out without testing, right? Without testing the impact on the customer experience? Are those situations there?
So I think testing the experience and experimenting are different in my mind. So I won't speak on behalf of all of Zendesk because I wouldn't be sure about how every team and product team would do it. So when I think about experimentation, I classify that more as like an A/B test. I see the benefits of that around language, positioning, styling, like signposting within a product, all of those things. It's not generally, I wouldn't generally be advising it for my teams around like building a feature or a product. I think the best way to learn and test for that is like early prototyping with your customers, leveraging like customer forums and customer groups to kind of get feedback from that way before you've even written a line of code, right? And that's a really effective and less expensive way to understand is how you're thinking about implementing it, like useful to those who will be using it every day. But I think experimentation in terms of A/B testing is definitely very useful around language and kind of more the usability UX side of the product rather than the feature itself. We use early access programs as well, and they're not a way for us to decide if we've built the right feature, but it's a way for us to allow customers early access to a feature and to get feedback sooner than we go to GA. And some of that feedback we will take on board before we actually go to general release as well. And so it's not experimentation because in the sense that you're thinking about, but it's another way that we get feedback early before it's generally available.
Right. So yeah, that makes sense. So there's a separate team, you mean to say, who that handles the experimentation part?
No. So like so the A/B testing, like we work with there is a team that look support that in Zendesk, but the product team itself would drive that forward and work with them on that. But it'd be within the product, your product org that would be responsible in your own individual product. And like as I said, like our design team and our content team would be heavily involved when they're UI-based experiments as well. We haven't done many on the Explore team yet, just because of where our product is. But in the past, that's how I would have done it, for sure.
Right, and of course, yeah, it now reminds me that indeed Zendesk has many different products. So yeah, it's a good thing. So I think I can take a question now. Ebenezer was ready to ask a question by going on mic, so I'll just let her speak. Ebenezer, I'm going to unmute you for a while. Please keep your question short and to the point. Your mic should be ready now. Hello, Ebenezer, can you hear me? Maybe not. We'll try again at a. Is it or? Okay, we'll try again in some time. Meanwhile, I can actually pick another question from Renato. Just let me find Renato here. Yep. So Renato, I'm going to unmute you. Just keep your question short and within a minute. Renato, can you hear me? Are you?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hey, Caroline, nice to meet you. Renato from Mexico. I have one question. Nice to meet you. Has it ever happened to you that the design and research teams have pushed back some product decisions, thinking from the user experience standpoint, and how you have handled it?
Yeah, I mean, we have the tenet of strong opinions loosely held within our organization. So absolutely, design, product, engineering have pushed back on decisions. And how we have resolved that is really by kind of going back to basics and understanding, you know, what we're trying to solve for, how is it going to be used, maybe walking through it physically when we were all physically in a room, like physically on a room and drawing it, mapping it out on a wall. But going back to that, like listening to understand, like I think it's really important that product might have an idea, design might have an idea, but ultimately we're serving users, we're serving our customers and their users as well. So it's about not going in from a product management point of view, not going in and assuming that you have the right solution in your head, and listening to an alternative. And oftentimes you'll find that you'll end up with either with a compromise. And in my experience, the product design often have very valid points to make, just because they're coming at it from a different lens. But I think talking through it, really, like being really open that you mightn't be right, or that they mightn't be right, being open to listening to what they're saying is important. For sure. We all advocate for the customer and for the end user, but I think they're really, really advocating for that. But like, the thing to remember is there's also the engineering. It's really important to bring engineering into those conversations, because potentially there's some reason why we can't implement the way design are suggesting from a technical perspective or from a performance perspective. So having that kind of the whole picture or the trifecta working together is important. Does that answer your question? It's possibly a bit waffly, but it is around listening, talking, and understanding the technical constraints that we have and that we're operating in the reality.
Thank you.
Renato, you said that you have one more question, is it?
Yeah, I have another one. What is the biggest impact you think a product operations role can bring to the team and also to the product?
Yeah, product operations. So I think reducing repetition of work is really important. So finding a way that we can do things once and use it many times is really important. I don't know about you guys, but like in my life as a PM and not just at Zendesk, we often have to present roadmaps in different ways and different times at different to different audiences. So like streamlining how we do that, so we have a systematic way of doing it, is really important. For product operations to help understand where the source of truth is for where work is, like whether you're using Jira and how you're using Jira around that is important. And for that shared learnings, I think, especially in an org the size of Zendesk, where the product and engineering org is so massive and so globally distributed, making sure that as teams learn, experiment, make mistakes, learn from them, that information is shared in a digestible way for the product org as a whole is really, really important. And I think being really clear on kind of what's expected, like helping the product orgs work to what's expected from them as an organization in terms of the reporting and comms and things like that. That just has to be done outside the daily running of your organization. So I think it's finding areas for repeatability, but like doing it once, using it many times, sharing learnings across organizations, or like product organizations within an org is really important. And then also like doing some of that work, which is like the heavy lifting work around evaluating tools and processes out there that we could bring into the org, and finding ways to experiment within teams and find what works and what's going to make us more productive as well.
Right. Thanks, Caroline, for that answer. I hope, Renato, you got the answer. Pamela has another interesting question that I want to ask you here, Caroline. So she's asking, okay, I'm unmuted. Does your product team practice lean UX by using a lot of low fidelity wireframes and prototypes to have customers test and then iterate again?
Yeah, so we're moving more to that. Yes, we use a lot of low Wi-Fi. So we're happy to start with drawings, like physical drawings on a piece of paper. It doesn't even have to be in Sketch or anything like that. So we encourage that. We're happy to share that with customers. But yes, the idea of low cost, quick turnaround for that, so that we can iterate, share it amongst customers, or share it internally with internal stakeholders, get feedback, and then mature those designs and wireframes as we go, for sure. Yeah. And we've been using things like Miro boards to help us with that in the last couple of months as well.
Right. I have personally used Miro, and it is really, really helpful. I would definitely say that. Right. So it seems that Ebenezer is back up. Let's try once again. Ebenezer, I have unmuted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hi, Ebenezer.
we can hear you now.
Great, thank you so much.
Firstly, let us know if you're pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Ebenezer?
Yes, it is. That's very
That's great.
Yeah,
please go ahead with the question.
Thank you so much for organizing this. We're actually a very not small company in the East African region, and we actually use Zendesk as well. So it was actually really great having today's guest panel. So my question is, how do you manage stakeholder expectations when there's a market opportunity, but then again, the company is not really bought into product processes yet, but just it's like a new company in product management, and we don't really have all the defined roles. But then, and we're managing multiple products in the same time and external products at the same time, external projects. So we have 3 internal products, and we're still taking on external projects as well. So it's a pretty ambitious company. But how do you manage kind of those stakeholders in terms of transitioning them into making sure that you're actually doing the right product processes in-house, so that you can have those goals achieved at the end of in due time? Because you end up doing multiple things and not really achieving anything, and you're just touching all different places at the same time.
I mean, that's an exciting and scary place to be when you're maturing an organization to a product org, because it takes a lot of communication. So a lot of time just, I think in my experience, goes into explaining to stakeholders who aren't necessarily, who are potentially the decision makers, but who aren't necessarily involved in kind of the running of the product side of things, understanding what the product org is and what the product org is responsible for and how they work, how you will work in conjunction and partnership with those other stakeholders to be an input into decisions. And I think a lot of that is a lot of time spent speaking with people, speaking around, helping educate them around what product management actually is, how you work, because, you know, if people haven't worked in that environment before, they sometimes default to thinking it's like project management, or they don't understand how product management and sales can be in partnership and marketing can be in partnership. So if they can't understand the role and they can't understand what you're trying to do, it's going to be very difficult for you to influence them, right? So for you to influence what work you should be doing and what products you should be building or what you shouldn't be doing. So I think the first thing is to really spend time educating, inviting them into some of your meetings, inviting them into some of your processes as bystanders, just so they can get a flavor for it. I think that's really useful. And once they have context, they can get appreciation. And then I think it's about understanding how your decision framework, right? So like, how as a product team are you deciding what to build? And then how does that extrapolate out to what other products the organization should be investing in, and whether internal products or external products as well. That would be my recommendation. There is no like silver bullet. There is no like, do this one thing and then everybody in your organization will suddenly understand what a product org does when you haven't been a product org before. It is a lot of time with people, and bring them into your world, and be clear, I guess, be honest that you want to kind of step into their world a little bit too, so you can help. And as I said, show them how you make decisions, show them the things that you think about when building product, and then that's how they'll get an understanding for how you should influence them.
Great. I think that's a really great answer, Caroline. I personally resonate with that. So since we're talking about people in the team, one question that I had, I think you have covered it already in some sense, but when the especially if you can talk about your own product team, right? So how does your product team work, and plan with the cross-functional teams, with the, let's say, billing team or the product marketing team or the voice of customer team, right? So how does that dynamic happen?
Yeah, so I spoke about this a good bit last year. So I think for us, it's that those teams are part of our product, or like part of our bigger org, right? So then we don't see them as services to us. They're definitely part of the conversation early on. Like, our product marketing team is involved when we're thinking about our strategy. They're involved when we're thinking about our roadmap. We don't just kind of hand it over to them at one point and say, like, we've done, ta-da, go make some magic marketing. And so we constantly communicate. So, and in a meaningful way, right? They're in our leadership org. They're part of all of our core Slack channels. They're part of like the standing meetings that we have as a entire product and engineering org. When we do our all hands, they're actively there and presenting. So they're embedded in. So we don't have this kind of tension. We're not kind of going to them, pitting to them, saying, we have this idea, can you now go and talk to customers about it or market it? They are inputting to us. So it is a real partnership. When I think of my product org, I think about all those supplementary teams as well. So we engage them early. We ask for their feedback. Right. We ask them to input, and they have this different perspective to the product than we do. It's the same way that product design have a different perspective to us. They're a little bit like, product managers are obviously eyes down and eyes out, but product marketers are eyes out a lot more than the product teams. They often bring a different flavor to it and thought process, and that's hugely, hugely important. And the other benefit that we have, especially for those kind of shared services like billing or legal or security, is that they're seeing what's going on in other product organizations, and they can give us some advice and some guidance based on what they've seen in those orgs as well. So it's a really great tool to leverage, relationship to leverage.
Right. And I was actually, when you were answering this question, I was actually thinking about how things have changed pre-COVID and post-COVID, right? we've as we also when we started our conversation, we talked about a little bit about this, but that human touch is lost.
Right.
Not entirely lost, but yeah, it's the distance has sort of increased, right? The way that we could experience each other, in a physical environment, that has reduced considerably, right? And for you as a manager of a team, you have your responsibility. One of the responsibilities
Right.
also to keep the morale of the team high, right? So when everybody is sitting in their respective homes and it's all a stressful situation
Right.
in the news, right? How do you still keep the team's morale up? How do you still keep them energetic and focused on the product, the task in hand?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think we always care about the people anyway and ask how they're doing, but like really kind of ask how they're doing and kind of listen and look for signs that people I'll speak for myself. I look and listen for signs that my team might be tired, stressed, or anxious, and they're not necessarily saying it, but you can read them when you know them well
Right.
enough. So I think looking for the nonverbal comms is really important, and allowing, if your one-on-one is just them talking about what's going on for them, that might be okay. And that might be the relief that they need because they've come off of 7 other Zoom calls. So that's important too. We've done it once, we'll instigate it again, like a team lunch where we have lunch together, and it worked like much better than, like, I can be a big cynic about these things. It worked much better than I thought. Like, people actually had lunch and chatted, and it was like social, and we weren't together, but it felt connected, and that was that was lovely. So
Right.
doing more of that is important, and just doing more of the it kind of going back to that comms, like the work that we're doing is still the right work. Feedback, if we're getting feedback from, like, just like a little bit shorter, lighter touches with the team, I think is important as well. But the real piece is, are they okay? Do they feel that they have what they need to do, whether that's the space or the headspace to do what they need to be doing right now? And do they feel that the work that they're doing is still the right work to be doing? And being honest and open about those things, I think is important.
Right. And at VW itself, as in the marketing team, we are planning to do a sort of virtual potluck, because
Nice.
that's all we can do. And hopefully we'll be able to do it soon. And that's a really great idea. I think
Yeah.
it's a great way to read those early signs of stress. And if you feel that any particular employee is under very stressful condition, or is taking a lot of stress per se, let's put it that way. It's good to reach out to them and ask, hey, what's wrong? Can I help you in some way?
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
it's hard. Like, I mean, when you're in the office environment, you might have been in meetings all day, but you were moving from room to room, and you were changing location, you were moving floors or whatever, and you were seeing different people along the way. When you're at home and you're sitting in the same chair for 8 hours and looking at the same monitor for 8 hours, it's exhausting. Even if you're not feeling stressed about your work, it's exhausting, and to acknowledge that, I think, is important. That Zoom fatigue is real. I think we all know that.
Right, that's absolutely great, and it's more perception based, right? Even if we might be investing the same
Right.
amount of time in the real work, but having to view the screen all day long just feels like you've worked for more hours than usual.
Exactly.
And that's why we are seeing a lot of conversation around people talking about, hey, are we working more
Right.
when we're working from home? And I've been sort of trying to understand by talking to colleagues that, are we really working more hours, or are we really just making it up just because we're feeling stressed
Right.
because of looking at the screen? So that's really important to look at as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So at this point, I think Pratima Rao also has a question around building a product team. Pratima, I think a part of the question that you've asked is already answered by Caroline, but I think the other part of your question is quite interesting. So I'm going to unmute you, Pratima, and you'll be able to ask your question live to Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the time to spend time with the larger product team. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, I'm currently working in a small startup. We have a couple of big products that we've worked on. We still uh, trying to scale it, grow the company, and set up the org from a product perspective. So I would really like to understand some of your insights about what are the few things that you would have considered, especially when you have to build the product team from scratch, in terms of how you would set the verticals. I do understand it can vary from company to company and there is no magic answer, but from your experience, if you can let us know what has worked, what are the few things you would definitely consider implementing or trying out, that would really help me personally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. I hope my answer is helpful. So I think there's a couple of things there. So I personally think it's important for product managers to feel they have ownership of a large enough surface area of the product and that it's not too narrow a focus. So understanding like what are your surface areas of the product and how can it be broken down? And don't challenge people to kind of cover a little bit more, and I think you'll get out of that. I think it's really important to understand how your engineering organization is set up and how your product organization will work with that. Because you can think about your product org and your surface area all you like, but if the engineering organization isn't set up to complement that, I think that's really going to be challenging in my experience. So are your engineering verticals aligned to how you're thinking about your product? So working with your engineering partner on that is critical. If you're in an organization where you're thinking of having like the product owner or a scrum master as well as the PM, understanding really and documenting really clearly upfront what the difference between those roles are can be important. And I've seen this cause tension in organizations as product orgs have grown, where you have both roles where it's unclear where the PO or Scrum Master stops and starts and the PM starts, and just understanding what those career paths are as well for those various roles is important, right? Because oftentimes, in my experience, people who are in those Scrum Master or PO roles want to be product managers, and it's like, so what's the path for them to get there is important. But I'd say the biggest thing is like you will be able to divide the product up in the way that makes sense for the number of product managers that you have. But if your engineering organization and your design organization, and if you're small, you're probably pretty lean on those things. But as you think about how you scale, it's really important that you're working through that with your engineering partner at the same time.
Great, thanks. Hope that answers your question, Pratima. We're just close to the 60-minute mark, so I have a room for one more question, Caroline, if I can take that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so this question is coming from Mohit Khetarpal. Mohit, I'm going to unmute you for a minute, and please make your questions quick. Yeah. Hello, Mohit, are you there? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Mohit, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi, Caroline. Hi. Thank you for this wonderful session. So I have a question. Yeah, I have a question. The question is like, how can you make sure that the teams that you are working with, for example, the engineering team or the designing team, they are as passionate as you about the product or the project that you are like working on, and they will be delivering quality and in time. Okay, so there is a scenario that you have joined recently and you are not aware about the teams and people out there in the new company, as you have already joined 1 year back also. So you might be having this kind of scenario. So
yeah. So I think I think the anchor to all of that is why, right? Why are you doing something? If your teams, regardless of their discipline, understand that and can speak to it and understand the impact of solving that why, the passion will be there. I mean, they have to hopefully that they're working on a product they believe in anyway. But to me, that's the foundation. Why are you doing something? And everybody in the team should be able to speak to why. They may say it in a slightly different way, but everyone should be able to say why. And I think allowing people to have a voice and being part of the process, kind of like what I spoke about earlier, will start to build a passion, because they're not just at the tail end of a process. They're not getting something handed over the fence. They've been able to input into the strategy, or they've been able to input into the feature that we're building, or how we're going to build it, or how we're thinking about it. They've been able to talk to a customer or hear a customer. So I think that inclusivity throughout the product development cycle, regardless of the role, is really important. But if you haven't read the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why, I would advise that.
Thanks for mentioning the word book. That sort of triggers me because I'll cheat. Although I said that this would be the last question, but the last question is going to be this now. What books are you currently reading from the personal standpoint, and also from the from the professional standpoint?
So I'm going to be completely honest. During COVID, I was spending all my mental capacity getting used to working from home and finding a workspace, and I was super exhausted, and like reading kind of fell off the bandwagon. But personally, I'm reading a book called The Last Days of Rabbit Haze, and it's very enjoyable. And professionally, I have my to be read pile, and these are the next ones I'm reading. So The Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu, The Coaching Habit, and Small Teachings, How We Can Make Incremental Changes and Learnings Throughout Our Day. So they're the next 3 on my professional expansion list that I will
read. If I were to pick one, like if I were to pick my next book, which one would you recommend then out of these 3?
The Making of a Manager, I think.
Right.
Yeah, Julie Zhu.
Right, I have heard a lot of good reviews about this book, and as I am also kind of progressing in this role, I think it's going to be really beneficial for me. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, trying to adjust myself to the new work from home culture and spending less time on the book, and I feel guilty about that. But yeah, for the love of reading, I do read a lot of articles online, and that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing, Caroline.
No worries.
I think we are 2 minutes overboard, so I think that's it for today. I hope I didn't shoot a lot of questions at you, Caroline.
No problem.
Right. So thank you so much, for inspiring
and anybody, you can find me on Twitter. If people have questions they want to ask, or if I can be more helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Guys, you can actually find Caroline on Twitter. Her handle is CHYNES. C Hynes, and you can shoot your questions there, and she'll be happy to answer. Also, if you can, if you want to connect with her on LinkedIn, do go ahead. Maybe that's also a way. And yeah, thanks, Caroline, for inspiring me personally.
Thanks,
and
everybody.
I hope everybody else is inspired as well. And yeah, thank you so much to the audience as well, for joining in and spending an hour with us. Right, and also, thank you so much for your great questions and being a wonderful audience. We have more interesting sessions coming up for the Masters of Conversion series, and I must say, Caroline, you are a true master. So yeah, guys, do visit vwo.com/webcast to watch all our past sessions and information regarding our upcoming ones. With that, have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and wash your hands regularly. Goodbye.
Bye.